Laius, the sixth king of Thebes and a descendant of Cadmus, had everything a man could want: a prosperous city, a beloved wife, and the promise of an heir to one day succeed him. But like so many who came before him, he made the mistake of consulting the oracle at Delphi about his future. The priestess's words were unambiguous and terrible. "Your son will kill you and bring ruin to your house." Laius returned to Thebes with dread in his heart. When his wife Jocasta gave birth to a son, he looked at the infant and saw not a child but a future murderer. He could not bring himself to kill the baby directly, for that would be a crime against the gods, but he could ensure the child did not survive. He summoned a trusted shepherd and gave him orders: "Take the infant to Mount Cithaeron, far from the city, and leave him there to die of exposure." To make certain the child could never crawl to safety, Laius pierced the baby's ankles with a pin, binding them together. The shepherd took the crying infant, its feet already beginning to swell from the wound, and set out for the mountain. But when the shepherd reached the desolate slopes of Cithaeron and looked down at the helpless child, he found himself unable to carry out his orders. Instead, he waited until he encountered a shepherd from the nearby city of Corinth and gave him the child instead. "Take this baby far from here," the Theban shepherd said. "See that he is cared for, but never let him know where he came from." The Corinthian shepherd agreed and brought the infant to his own king and queen, Polybus and Merope, who had long desired a child without any success. They welcomed the baby with joy, and when they saw his swollen, damaged feet, they named him Oedipus, meaning swollen foot, a name that would forever mark him as one who had known suffering from his very first breath. Oedipus grew up in Corinth, believing himself to be the legitimate son of Polybus and Merope. He was strong, intelligent, and quick to anger, traits that would bring him both joy and hardship in the years to come. For a time he lived a good life with his adoptive parents, but all it would take would be a single comment for it to all come crashing down. Attending a feast one evening, young Oedipus would be confronted by a drunk who shouted an accusation for all to hear. "Bastard child! You're no true son of Polybus. Everyone in Corinth knows it but you." The man was quickly dragged away, but the words lodged in Oedipus's mind like a splinter. He asked his parents if he was truly their son, and they assured him he was. But doubt had taken root. When he was unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Oedipus travelled to Delphi to consult the oracle himself. He stood before the priestess in the temple, the air thick with incense, her eyes distant, lost in whatever visions the gods sent her. "Tell me," Oedipus demanded, "who are my true parents?" But the oracle did not answer his question. Instead, she delivered a prophecy that would haunt him forever. "You will kill your father and marry your mother. You will bring ruin and pollution to your family and your city." Oedipus staggered from the temple, unable to shake the words from his mind. He thought of kind King Polybus and gentle Queen Merope, the only parents he had ever known. He loved them both so dearly, and could not bear to imagine the events of the prophecy being played out against them. He made his decision immediately. He would never return to Corinth. If he stayed away from his parents, the prophecy could never be fulfilled. He would go somewhere else, anywhere else, and build a new life far from those he loved. He set out on foot, not knowing where he would go, knowing only that he could never go home. But fate would not let him escape so easily. The road he took led him east, towards Thebes the true city of his birth, although he did not know it. The road narrowed as it approached a crossroads, a place where three paths met in a rocky junction. Oedipus was walking when he heard the rattle of wheels behind him. A chariot was approaching, and approaching fast, with no intention of slowing. The driver was shouting curses at him, demanding he move aside to clear a path for his betters. Oedipus stepped to the side, but not quickly enough. The chariot thundered past, and, as it did, the passenger, an elderly man with a grey beard and a cruel face, struck Oedipus across the head with his staff, berating him for daring to be in the way. Oedipus's mind clouded with rage. He had committed no offence, he had moved aside, and this arrogant old man had struck him like a disobedient slave. He lunged forward, grabbing the staff and pulling the old man from the chariot. They fought there in the dust of the crossroads, the old man and his guards against Oedipus alone, but Oedipus was strong and well-trained, with him killing them all in his fury, the guards, the driver, and finally the old man himself, beating him to death with the very staff he had used to strike. When it was over, Oedipus stood among the bodies, his hands bloody, his rage giving way to the cold realization of what he had done. He had killed in self-defense, he reassured himself. The old man had struck first. Any man would have done the same in his place. He dragged the bodies to the side of the road and continued on his way, not knowing that the elderly man lying dead in the dust was Laius, the king of Thebes, his true father. The first part of the prophecy had been fulfilled. Oedipus continued along the road until the walls of Thebes came into view, but as he approached the city gates, he saw something that made him stop. The gates were closed and the walls lined with guards, and at the main entrance, perched on a rocky outcrop, was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It had the head of a woman, beautiful in a cold and fearsome way, with eyes that held no mercy. Its body was that of a lion, while its back sprouted the wings of a great bird. This was the Sphinx, sent by Hera to punish Thebes for the crimes of its kings. The creature had been terrorizing the city for months, stopping anyone who tried to enter or leave, and asking a riddle. Those who answered incorrectly were torn apart on the spot, with the roads to Thebes now lined with bloody corpses. With no way to pass the beast, trade had all but stopped, with the city slowly succumbing to starvation. The situation had become so desperate that the rulers of Thebes had made a proclamation. Anyone who could destroy the Sphinx would be made king and would marry Queen Jocasta, recently widowed after her husband disappeared on the road to Delphi. As Oedipus approached the gates, the Sphinx turned its unsettling gaze towards him, a vicious smile appearing on its lips. "Another traveller," it purred, its voice unnatural, like a beast mimicking human speech without truly understanding it. "Do you know the price of entry?" "I know," Oedipus said, fighting to keep the fear out of his voice. "Ask your riddle." The Sphinx's eyes shone with delight. "What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening?" Oedipus's mind raced, turning the words over, searching for the answer that had eluded so many before him. Morning, noon, and evening. 4 legs, 2 legs, then 3. What creature changed like that? Oedipus felt sweat bead on his forehead. One wrong answer, and he would become another nameless corpse decorating the road to Thebes. Think. Morning, noon, and evening. Maybe these were not times of day at all, but stages. Stages of a life. It was so simple, so obvious, yet all those corpses had failed to see it. Oedipus looked up at the Sphinx and spoke, confidence flooding through him. Man. The answer is man. In the morning of his life, man crawls on all fours as a baby. At noon, in his prime, he walks on 2 legs, and in the evening, as an old man, he walks with a cane, a 3rd leg to support him. The Sphinx recoiled in horror, toppling backwards as if it had been hit by an invisible blow. Letting out an inhuman shriek, it threw itself from the rock, plummeting to the ground below, where it hit the stones with a sickening crack. Oedipus had done it. He had solved the impossible riddle and saved the city. The gates opened, and the people of Thebes poured out to celebrate their liberator. They carried him on their shoulders through the streets, cheering his name, calling him savior and hero. Within days he was crowned king, and within weeks he married Queen Jocasta, a woman old enough to be his mother, but still beautiful, with a kindness in her eyes that made him feel safe for the first time since he had left Corinth. He did not know, he could not have known, that Jocasta was his mother. The second part of the prophecy had been fulfilled. For many years, Oedipus and Jocasta ruled Thebes together. They had 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons, with the city prospering under their rule. Oedipus was a good king, known for being just and wise, and he believed he had escaped the prophecy. He had built a new life, far from Corinth, and he was happy. But then the plague came. It started with the crops. The fields withered, and nothing that was planted would grow. Then the livestock began to die. Then the plague reached the people themselves. Children died in their beds. Women miscarried. Men collapsed in the streets without warning. The city that had thrived under Oedipus's rule was dying, and no one knew why. Oedipus sent his brother-in-law, Creon, to Delphi to consult the oracle, but when Creon returned, his face was pale and his message grim. The plague will not end until the murderer of King Laius is found and punished. His blood still pollutes the city. Oedipus was determined to find this murderer. He had never met Laius, for the old king had died before Oedipus arrived in Thebes, but he vowed to discover who had killed him and bring them to justice. He summoned Tiresias, the blind prophet of Thebes, a man who could see the future even though he could not see the present. "Tell me who killed Laius," Oedipus commanded. But Tiresias refused. "Do not ask me this," the old man said. "Let the past stay buried." Oedipus grew angry. "You know who the murderer is, and you won't speak? Are you protecting them?" The prophet's blind eyes turned towards the king. "You are the murderer you seek. You killed Laius, and that is only the beginning of the horror." Oedipus was furious. He accused Tiresias of lying, of conspiring with Creon to steal the throne. He dismissed the prophet and turned to his wife for reassurance. Jocasta tried to comfort him. "Do not trust prophecies," she said. "They are often wrong. Laius was told he would be killed by his own son, but our child died as an infant on Mount Cithaeron. Laius was killed by bandits at a crossroads years later. See, the prophecy was false." But Oedipus had stopped listening at the word crossroads. His heart began to race. "What crossroads?" he asked. "When did this happen? What did Laius look like?" As Jocasta described her first husband, his age, his appearance, the time of his death, Oedipus felt a cold spreading through his chest. Every detail matched the old man he had killed at the crossroads. Oedipus could not believe what he was hearing. For 3 days he locked himself in his chamber, refusing food or water, refusing even his wife's desperate pleas. The city grew worried for their king. On the 3rd day, a guard knocked with unexpected news. A messenger had arrived from Corinth. King Polybus, the man who had raised Oedipus through his youth, was dead. Oedipus rushed to the throne room. "See," he said to Jocasta almost desperately, "the prophecy was wrong. Polybus was my father, and he died of old age. I did not kill him. Perhaps the oracle was mistaken about everything." But the messenger from Corinth, an old shepherd, saw Oedipus's distress and tried to offer comfort. "My lord," he said gently, "you need not grieve so deeply. Polybus was a good man, but he was not your father by blood. I know this because I am the one who brought you to him as an infant. I found you on Mount Cithaeron, your ankles bound and pierced, and carried you to Corinth myself." Oedipus felt his heart sink. "What do you mean? Who gave me to you?" "A shepherd from Thebes," the Corinthian said. "He could not bear to let you die, as he had been ordered. The king and queen of Thebes had commanded the child be left on the mountain to die. They feared a prophecy that their son would grow up to kill his father." The words hit Oedipus like a blow. The king of Thebes, the son prophesied to kill his father, a baby abandoned with pierced ankles. He looked down at his own feet, at the scars on his ankles that had given him his name, Oedipus, swollen foot. Oedipus stood frozen as the truth crashed down upon him. He had killed his father at the crossroads. He had married his mother. His children were also his siblings. Everything Tiresias had said was true. Everything the prophecy had foretold had come to pass, despite every effort to prevent it. Jocasta had realized it too. "No," she whispered, backing away from the man who was both her son and husband. "No, it cannot be," she cried, fleeing from the room. When Oedipus finally regained his senses, he ran after Jocasta, following her trail to the bedchamber that they shared. But when he threw open the chamber doors, he was met with a sight more horrific than any he could have imagined. The woman who was both his wife and mother, who had borne both him and his children, was hanging from the ceiling beam, her lifeless eyes staring back at him. Oedipus fell to the ground, weeping uncontrollably. He cut the body down, cradled it in his arms, and began to rock back and forth, his entire life having crumbled around him. Then his eyes fell on the golden brooches that fastened Jocasta's robe. He took them in shaking hands and drove them into his own eyes again and again, screaming as the blood ran down his face. "I will not see," he cried. "I will not look upon what I have done." Blind and broken, Oedipus was exiled from the city he had saved, driven out as an abomination. Only his daughter, Antigone, chose to go with him. Taking her father's hand, she led the broken man out of the gates of Thebes to an unknown future. For years afterward, Oedipus wandered Greece as a beggar, blind and broken, guided only by Antigone's gentle voice. People spat at him when they learned his name. They called him cursed, disgraceful, an offense to the gods. He had tried to escape his fate and had instead run straight toward it. He had been the solver of riddles, the saviour of Thebes and its wisest king, and all of it had been built on a foundation of patricide and incest that he had committed unknowingly. He died far from Thebes, an old man worn down by suffering, a reminder that no mortal, no matter how clever or determined, can escape what fate has written for them. The curse of Harmonia's necklace had claimed another victim. Oedipus's children would inherit the same doom, with the bloodline of Cadmus destined to end in tragedy. But elsewhere in Greece, other heroes were rising, with new bloodlines emerging that would shape the Age of Heroes. I've been David Rintoul for Deep Dive History. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye.